Welcome to Reddit Revenge Stories. Did you know over 90% of people watch these videos but don't subscribe? If you enjoy stories of justice and payback, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to like the video if you're ready for today's story. Let's get to the story. My name is Daniel. For years, I believed I was living the perfect life. A beautiful wife, a stable job, a cozy home. All the ingredients of the happiness that most people dream about. But sometimes, what looks perfect from the outside hides a darkness that you never expect. And when that darkness finally reveals itself, you learn things about yourself you never thought possible. This is my story. And it's not just a story of betrayal. It's a story of revenge. I met my wife, Laura, back in college. She was vibrant, full of life, and had this charm that could light up any room she walked into. Everyone adored her. And when she agreed to go on a date with me, I felt like the luckiest man alive. From that first date, we were inseparable. We shared dreams, ambitions, and late-night conversations about our future together. I was certain I had found my soulmate. After graduation, I landed a decent job in finance, and Laura pursued a career in event planning. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony surrounded by family and close friends. Our first years together were blissful. We traveled, built a life together, bought our first house, and even adopted a dog. It felt like the universe had rewarded me. But as years went by, I noticed subtle changes. Changes that, at first, I brushed off because I trusted her completely. She started staying out late, saying her job required late meetings with clients or last-minute event preparations. Her phone was always on silent and she guarded it like a priceless treasure. Text messages became shorter, colder. Her eyes, once so warm, started to carry a distance I couldn't explain. I blamed myself at first. Maybe I wasn't giving her enough attention. Maybe she was stressed at work. Maybe she just needed space. I tried everything to rekindle the spark. Romantic dinners, surprise vacations, even just random flowers on a Tuesday. But nothing seemed to reach her anymore. One evening, after another one of her late-night meetings, she came home smelling of an unfamiliar cologne. I asked casually who she had been with. She answered without hesitation, mentioning a new client, Michael, who had just hired her for a corporate event. She laughed off my suspicion, kissed me lightly, and disappeared into the shower. That night, I couldn't sleep. My gut told me something was wrong, but I didn't want to be that paranoid husband who accuses his wife without proof. Still, the doubts festered inside me like poison, and that poison slowly took over my mind. A few weeks later, I decided to take a day off work. Laura left early for one of her supposed client meetings. After she left, I followed her. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I kept a safe distance. She drove across town and parked in front of a fancy condominium. I watched as a tall man opened the door for her and she threw her arms around him. They kissed, not a polite kiss, but a deep, passionate one. It felt like my entire world collapsed in that single moment. My stomach twisted in knots, my vision blurred, and my heart pounded in my chest. My Laura, my wife, with another man. I drove back home in a daze. I sat in the dark living room staring at nothing as our dog whined softly beside me. I'd always thought I would fall apart if I ever discovered something like this. But instead, a strange calm washed over me. I didn't confront her that night. In fact, I pretended nothing had happened. Over the following days, I observed her closely. The lies continued. More meetings, more phone calls, more secrets. Each lie she told was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. But I still said nothing. Instead, I began planning. I didn't want a loud confrontation. I didn't want tears or apologies. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal the way I felt it. I wanted her to experience destruction from the inside out, just as I had. First, I gathered evidence. I hired a private investigator, a quiet man named Harris who specialized in infidelity cases. Harris was thorough. He provided me with photos, videos, and detailed reports of Laura's meetings with Michael, hotel visits, weekend getaways, dinners. It was all meticulously documented. Second, I secured my finances. Laura and I shared everything: accounts, investments, property. but I quietly transferred most of my savings into a separate account under my name. I contacted a lawyer and explained my situation. We drafted documents, safeguarded my assets, and prepared for what was to come. Third, I built alliances. Laura's family adored me, and I made sure to remain the loving, faithful husband in their eyes. I visited her parents, helped them with errands, and kept them close. I knew that when the truth came out, having their support would tip the scales in my favor. The hardest part was maintaining the act. Each morning, I kissed her goodbye as she left for her rendezvous. Each night, I listened as she fabricated her stories. I smiled, nodded, and told her I loved her. But inside, my anger simmered quietly like a volcano waiting to erupt. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, Laura casually mentioned that Michael had offered her a business partnership. She spoke with excitement, explaining how the two of them planned to open a high-end event planning firm together. She would need some initial capital, but she assured me it would be a great investment for our future. I nodded and smiled. Of course, darling. Whatever makes you happy. But that was the final trigger. She wasn't just betraying me emotionally. Now she wanted to use my resources to fund her affair partner's business. The audacity fueled my determination. It was time to execute my plan. The next few weeks were critical. I pretended to be supportive. I accompanied her to meetings, reviewed business proposals, and even suggested ways to attract clients. She was thrilled, thinking she had completely fooled me. Michael too played his part, shaking my hand, smiling, pretending to be just a business associate. The two of them were playing a dangerous game, blind to the trap I was setting. Behind the scenes, I continued gathering evidence. Bank transfers, messages, hidden cameras in our home office. Everything was documented. With Harris's help, I collected an airtight case that would expose them both professionally and personally. Finally, the moment arrived. Laura scheduled a formal business launch party. She invited potential investors, friends, family, and associates. It was a grand event, held at one of the most prestigious hotels in the city. Everyone important in her life was there, including her parents, our mutual friends, and her precious Michael. As the evening progressed, Laura stood confidently on stage, thanking everyone for their support. She introduced Michael as her trusted business partner. The crowd applauded politely, unaware of the storm about to hit. And then it happened. The large projector screen behind them lit up. A slideshow began, but not the business presentation they had prepared. Instead, photo after photo displayed their secret meetings. Videos of them entering hotels, embracing passionately, text messages they had exchanged, audio recordings of their whispered conversations, declaring love for each other while plotting how to siphon money from me. The room fell into stunned silence. Gasps echoed across the hall. Laura's face turned pale as she stared at the screen, frozen in horror. Michael shifted uncomfortably, his face drained of color. Her parents looked at me wide-eyed. I stood calmly, holding a small remote in my hand. I spoke, my voice steady but firm. I apologize for the interruption, but I believe the truth deserves to be known before anyone invests a penny in this partnership. The silence was deafening. Laura attempted to speak, but words failed her. Her father stood up and shouted, "How could you do this to him?" To us! The crowd slowly began to disperse, murmuring in disbelief. Investors withdrew their support instantly. Michael slipped away quietly like a coward abandoning a sinking ship. I didn't stay long after that. I had made my point. That night, Laura came home. She cried, begged, pleaded. She told me it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that we could fix it. But I simply handed her the divorce papers. Everything was already in motion. The house, which was solely in my name after the financial restructuring, remained mine. The joint accounts had been secured. Her betrayal cost her everything, her business, her reputation, and her comfortable life. Excellent. Let's continue with Part 2. Eye of the story, maintaining the same clean, YouTube-safe style, non-sexual, non-gratifying, unique, and full of revenge, all told from the husband's perspective. This part will also be at least 10,000 characters long. After the night of the business launch disaster, everything changed. For Laura, for me, for everyone who had been fooled by her perfect facade. But my plan wasn't over. The public exposure was only phase one. The real revenge was yet to unfold. You see, betrayal isn't just about personal hurt. It's also about trust, and Laura had violated it in every possible way. My next steps were carefully designed not to destroy her in a moment of rage, but to dismantle her life piece by piece, the way she dismantled our marriage. Laura moved out of the house the very next day. She had no choice. I had already filed for exclusive possession of the property. Her things were packed and waiting for her when she returned. I watched her silently as she loaded the boxes into her car, her eyes swollen from crying. She tried once more to speak, but I turned and walked inside, locking the door behind me. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. My lawyer, who had been fully briefed long before the launch party, filed everything. Thanks to the overwhelming evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct, the court granted me full control over the majority of our shared assets. The business she tried to create with Michael collapsed overnight. Investors pulled out, vendors canceled contracts, and word spread fast in the tight-knit event planning community. Her professional credibility was shredded beyond repair. Michael, the man she risked everything for, vanished as quickly as he had appeared. Rumor had it that once he saw the legal mess she was in, he cut off all contact. She tried calling him dozens of times, but he blocked her on every platform. He used her, and when she became a liability, he abandoned her like yesterday's trash. But even then, I wasn't done. Laura still had one card left, her social circle. Friends who sympathized with her, believing her sob stories that I had been cold, distant, and negligent as a husband. She tried to play the victim. She told anyone who would listen that she was seduced by Michael because I had emotionally abandoned her. Unfortunately for her, I had anticipated this too. One by one, I met with our mutual friends. I never raised my voice, never played the bitter husband. I simply presented them with the undeniable facts, recordings, photos, financial statements, and text logs that told the full story. I didn't ask for their sympathy. I let the truth speak for itself. Slowly, one friend after another distanced themselves from Laura. She went from being the beloved social butterfly to the person nobody wanted to be associated with. Her phone calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped arriving. The very people she once bragged to about her exciting double life now whispered behind her back. I admit, there were moments I questioned whether I was going too far. Was I becoming cruel? Was I losing myself in revenge? But then I would remember the look on her face when she stood beside Michael, lying so effortlessly while planning to build a future with him using my money. That memory hardened my resolve. Her financial situation quickly deteriorated. With no business income and no access to the assets I'd secured, she struggled to pay her mounting legal fees. She moved into a small apartment in a less desirable part of town. Gone were the luxury cars, the designer handbags, and the lavish vacations she used to flaunt on social media. Now she was scraping by, taking odd jobs while trying to salvage her ruined reputation. But even as I watched her fall, I remained calm. I focused on rebuilding my own life. Not as a man broken by betrayal, but as someone who had overcome it. I poured myself into my career. My company promoted me to a senior executive role. I traveled, made new connections, and for the first time in years felt completely free. Yet fate had one more twist waiting for both of us. About a year after our divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected phone call from one of Laura's former clients, Mrs. Whitaker, a wealthy, influential woman who often hosted high-profile charity galas. She explained that Laura had approached her, desperately seeking work. Mrs. Whitaker, having heard bits and pieces of Laura's fall from grace, wanted to know the full truth before hiring her for anything. I met Mrs. Whitaker for lunch and told her everything, not with anger or vengeance in my tone, just facts. She listened intently, nodding occasionally and thanked me sincerely for my honesty. A few days later, Laura called me, her voice shaking. "You're still ruining my life, Daniel," she sobbed. "I'm trying to rebuild. Can't you just let me be?" "I haven't contacted anyone, Laura," I replied calmly. "The truth is simply following you. That's not my fault. The truth had become her shadow, one she could never escape. She had built her identity on lies, and now those lies haunted every attempt she made to start over. But then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, as I sat at my favorite coffee shop reading a book, a woman approached my table. Her name was Rachel, a friend of a friend who had heard about my situation and admired how I handled everything with dignity and control. We talked for hours that day. She was intelligent, kind, and refreshingly honest. Unlike Laura, Rachel didn't wear masks or play games. Over the next several months, we grew closer. For the first time since my world collapsed, I felt genuine happiness blooming again. It wasn't rushed or forced. It was natural. Ironically, Laura found out about Rachel through mutual acquaintances. And that's when the phone calls and messages started again. Not of apology or reconciliation, but of bitterness and jealousy. "She'll leave you too, Daniel," Laura hissed one evening on the phone. "They all do." "Maybe," I said calmly. "But at least she started with honesty, something you never did." Laura hung up, defeated. It was clear that seeing me move on, happily and confidently, was the most painful revenge of all. Still, part of me couldn't completely let go of everything. That had happened. There was one final thread I needed to pull. Remember Michael? The man who had slipped into the shadows after everything unraveled? Well, through some quiet digging, I discovered that he had a habit of seducing married women and exploiting them financially. Laura wasn't his first victim. He had done this before, multiple times, across different cities under slightly altered identities. But unlike Laura, some of his previous victims had filed charges against him: fraud, identity theft, and even extortion. I anonymously forwarded everything I had on Michael to the authorities. Detailed reports, financial trails, witness testimonies, all meticulously documented thanks to Harris, my trusted investigator. Within months, Michael was arrested in another state, facing multiple charges that would likely put him behind bars for years. When the news broke, Laura reached out again, this time through a long, desperate email. "He used me too, Daniel. I was stupid. I was blind. I thought he loved me. You were the only one who truly cared." I read her words carefully, letting every sentence sink in. But I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. The story she had written for herself was over, and I wasn't interested in being part of the sequel. Instead, I closed my laptop, took Rachel's hand, and walked away from that chapter of my life completely. But even now, when people ask me about it, I simply say, sometimes you don't have to scream or shout to get revenge. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people fall under the weight of their own choices. And that truly was the sweetest victory of all. Months turned into years and life found its rhythm again. Rachel and I grew stronger together, building something real, something grounded in honesty. Occasionally, Laura's name would come up in conversation, mostly through distant acquaintances. She had relocated to a smaller city trying to piece together what was left of her shattered reputation. But her past followed her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. I never answered her occasional emails anymore. She became nothing more than a distant chapter, a cautionary memory I had fully moved beyond. Strangely, I didn't hate her anymore. The anger had faded. What remained was a strange sense of peace. Not because I had forgotten, but because I had won without becoming the monster she tried to make me. One quiet evening, as Rachel and I sat on our porch watching the sunset, she squeezed my hand gently. "Do you ever regret not retaliating more?" I smiled softly. Number, "Sometimes life takes care of it for you." And as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, I finally closed the book of betrayal, knowing that my revenge had never been in the destruction. It was in my quiet, steady rise above it all.